Exclusive buyer agency agreement. This is a form that we will sign when we decide we're going to work together. And just so you know, before we cross a threshold of a home, I have to have this signed by both of us. So the way it will work is you will come into agreement with Intercoastal Realty, and that's the firm I work for. And we will sign off that we are deciding on what day we will begin this agreement, and we can decide what day we end this agreement. So it could be 6 months, it could be 12 months, just depends on how long it's going to take to find the right house. And of course, we can adjust it as needed. We always decide on the area. It may be you want me to only represent you in New Hanover County. You may have another agent in another county. I do personally work New Hanover, Brunswick, and Pender, sometimes Onslow, but those are the counties I'm most familiar with. And so we'll decide on our term for it, and then we have to decide on the compensation of the firm. So I always have my buyers sign at 3%. So what that means is when the property closes, I expect to receive 3% of the purchase price. Now, sellers traditionally have paid commission. It's been built into the purchase price. So buyers have always paid commission, but it has always come out of the seller's net. So if the seller is offering less than 3%, that's when you and I may have a conversation. If it's 2.5%, we may come back and modify this agreement and do 2.5%. If we've been working together for over a year, it might be that I ask you to pay the other 0.5%. The good news is it's all negotiable. So we will discuss it and do whatever's best for you and your family. So that's just one of those things I want you to know, that I'm in the business to get families and houses, and I'm going to do my part to make sure that happens. There's another place where I'll have you initial on this form that you understand that my services are not free, and more than likely the compensation will be part of the purchase price, but it may not be also. But again, we'll have those conversations so you understand completely what's going on. All right, there's a note in here that says the real estate compensation is not fixed by law, and it's set by each broker individually, and it's all negotiable. Just remember, everything in life is negotiable for the most part. All right, next is the firm's duties. And my duties will be to look after you and make sure I find the best property for you at the best price and the best terms, and do as much investigation before we even put any non-refundable due diligence money down to make sure you're making a good decision. Please know anything you tell me will be confidential. Even the fact that you're buying a house, that's not something I disclose with other people. Even if we're all friends, I just keep that to myself. Of course, I'm going to take care of you well, and make sure that you end up with the right property for you. Now, the next thing I want to discuss are personal letters. So sometimes a buyer, if it's a really competitive situation with a property, a buyer will want to write a letter and explain why they want to purchase this house and why it'll be so good for their family, which is very lovely, and it tugs at the heartstrings, but sometimes it can violate state and federal fair housing laws. So we have to be very careful on that. So if you choose to write a letter, please let me know, and we'll have to discuss how that needs to be handled. All right, so the buyer's duties. Your duties are to make sure you're available so you can see properties. You need to make sure that you're ready to work with your lender, or you have your proof of funds ready. You have to do your part to make sure we can get you into the best home possible. And just know that when we do our inspections, I'm also going to want you to consult other professionals. It may be an accountant you need to talk to. Of course, it could be a surveyor. We'll absolutely do a home inspection, and that could also lead to a roof inspection, an HVAC inspection, structural engineer. There's all kinds of things that come up when we do these home inspections. So I will be your point of contact, but I also will encourage you to use other professionals as well. I will always give you a sample offer to purchase for you to review and let me know what questions. And then I'm also going to give you a sample copy of professional services and disclosures. And this is a form that we'll sign that essentially walks you through all the different service providers we're going to use in a transaction, and you'll understand who orders what and when and where. All right. Next thing is all of your offers that you make on a property will be confidential. And I encourage you also, don't tell your neighbors, don't tell your friends, because you never know who knows someone else and they may be interested in the property as well. So it's always important to keep these things confidential. No one needs to know what a purchase price is until it records and it's a matter of public record. All right. The next thing is dual agency. So when you buy a property that Intercoastal has listed, that would be dual agency for the firm, which means that the listing agent works for Intercoastal Realty and I work for Intercoastal Realty. So Intercoastal will receive a portion of the compensation on each side of that transaction. However, if you were to buy one of my listings, I would designate an agent to represent you because I don't like to practice dual agency when I represent the buyer and seller. I'd rather only represent one side of the transaction and look after that side's best interest. So on the form, I'll always have you initial that you are okay with dual agency, which means you're okay to buy an Intercoastal listing. And you also understand that I do not practice dual agency, but I would designate an agent for you if you were to buy one of my specific listings. All right, moving on. Okay, there's a next thing in here. It's on page 5 under F. It says that if there's a dual agent compensation, which means Intercoastal has the listing, I'm representing you as buyer. Intercoastal expects to get 6%. That's pretty much industry standards. However, remember I mentioned that everything's negotiable. So even though that's what's going to be in this form, it specifically says this will in no way affect or modify the amount of the fee set forth in paragraph 4 the firm expects to receive for its services in representing the buyer under this agreement. So it's just something that's part of the agreement that I have to put something in there, and that's what I put because traditionally that's what the case has been. Sometimes it could be more, sometimes it could be less. All right, next. All right, when we are walking through a home, I want you to understand there is a good chance that they may have cameras and they may be listening. Technically, they're supposed to tell us that, but I just want you to be aware that if we're walking through a property, be cautious of your body language and what you say because we don't want to give away too much. If you're really excited about something, we want to try to be able to negotiate if that's possible. So just be aware. Even when we walk up to the Ring doorbells, typically they're listening right then too. So I sometimes like to just say hello. All right, if you're in the home, photographs and videos, unless they prohibit it and tell us beforehand, you are allowed to take some video. You may want to send it to a family member or a friend. You may do that. However, we need to be just doing what's in plain sight. You would never open up a drawer or a cabinet and take a picture. It's just not what is acceptable. So just keep that in mind, but if it's allowed, you're allowed to do video. All right, the next thing is wire fraud. So when it comes down to closing on the property, you're going to be required to wire the funds for closing to the attorney's office. I will never send you these instructions. My transaction coordinator will never send you these instructions, only the attorney. What I expect a buyer to do, and I always explain this, is I want you to call the attorney's office, verify the instructions, and then when you go to the bank to wire the funds, I want you to have them call and verify. Just to double check, we're going to cross the I's, dot the T's, and be a little over dramatic just to make sure that the funds are indeed going to the attorney's office because wire fraud, unfortunately, is real and something we have to deal with. All right, and the last page is when you sign it, and we're ready to roll and start finding homes that are right for you and your family. So let me know what other questions you have, and I look forward to serving you. Thank you.